Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for this great interview of Magnifying Your Impact. And today I'm with a great friend of mine in Udayan Goyal. And Uday has had an amazing career in so many ways, particularly with regards to his ability to create impact in the financial sector from a disruptive perspective, I think is the way that I look at it. Because, I think I've grown up in an environment whereby we used to see banks and financial services and investment in a very traditional way. And of course, over that, I guess Uday can tell me a lot more. He knows a heck of a lot more than I do. But in the last 10, 15 years, of course, we've needed to globally to understand how we can reshape not just the platforms of financial services, but also, I'm sure very much we all agree, the values and the belief structures that needed to change for the modern world as to how we all do business and how we create wealth. And now my sense is, and I'm sure Uday can give us more timelines on this, but now how important it is that we understand how we create a sense of impact for all of us in the world through financial models, not just people who are creating a lot more, huge wealth in the world. This is really about, these days, it's about environmental sustainability and looking at an investment emotionally, for the greater good, not just for a very small amount of individuals. And Uday's right in the center of this. I met him when he'd founded a wonderful platform and a disruptive organization from a financial perspective in Anthemis. And now he's gone on to create another great organization called Apis Partners, which really concentrates on helping us to make the right investments worldwide to create that impact. So Uday, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Craig. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you. And this is going to be fascinating for me because your background is an amazing journey, I guess, with regards to where you've come from and how you think strategically about the world and about what we should be doing out there to make a difference. So with that, I just thought if you just give us an idea of where you came from, maybe from when you were a kid or from when you started your career to where you are now.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, and I think it's very interesting from a formative perspective. I'm Freudian in that sense that often where we've been is a big constituent of who we become, and
Yes.
the journey to today I think has been very formative for me for many aspects. But I grew up in India. I was the son of a sort of typical middle-class family in India. And my father was a diplomat. In fact, when I was born, he was in Japan, posted there, and then, moved country by country from Japan to Bangladesh, from Bangladesh to the Middle East, from the Middle East to South America, from South America, to Europe and so forth. So I think I was really blessed and lucky to have the opportunity at a very young age to see the world, and to see the world in ways that a lot of people wouldn't have the opportunity to really be in a place for a long time and to really be immersed in different cultures, different languages, different places. I remember growing up as a child in Rome. My first language was a combination of English, Hindi, and Italian. And then you're moving on from there to South America, and many of those places. And I think they're all very formative. And I gave me, I suspect, I would say, a very world view at a relatively young age. And that really allowed me, I guess, to be more adaptable and fit in wherever I ended up. At the age of 11, I was sent off to boarding school. And I was sent off to boarding school in India for 5 years. That was great because it gave me a grounding in a particular country, my native country, gave me the ability to build networks in that country and really have the cultural affinity with that country in a way I probably would have struggled to had I continued to move around with my parents, even though I saw them for holidays. And so I got kind of the best of both worlds. And then I guess at the age of 16, I ended up moving to the UK. I came here on a scholarship to a boarding school here, and then ended up going to university in the UK, and then subsequently started my work career. And my work career University was fantastic. Fantastic for many reasons. One is I met my future wife and life partner at university, which was probably one of the most formative experiences for me, and somebody who's really shaped me to who I am today. And post university, ended up working and worked largely in London, but also a little bit in New York, and came back and forth. And through those years, started out in banking for many, many years. And then, as you mentioned, 2009, I left and started Anthemis with a gentleman called Sean Park. And then in 2014, I started APIS with a gentleman called Matteo Stefanel, who's also my closest friend and who had worked with for many, many years at Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank, DLJ prior to that, in my banking career. So really had all those years. And I think at each step they have had fundamental, I guess, influences in who I am today, and some of the aspects of who I've become today, and some of the motivations of why I've done what I've done.
Talk to me about what you think has made you as successful as you've been in all of these different platforms, be it the big investment banks and now with your companies. So let me give you a number. What do you think are the three things that have helped you to become most successful?
The three things, it's always hard to pick three things, because there's, as I said, it's such a multitude of factors that one needs to think about. But I think probably the most important thing is that is an attitude, and the attitude is always to learn. As long as you're always learning, and as long as you're always assimilating information, I think that's super important. And I think the three qualities, if you want to put it, what three qualities have been important for me personally, it's been very scrappy, perseverant. I mean, just basically always fighting at every step. I've always had to really fight for everything in life. So when I was growing up, every time I'd move to a new country with my parents, I'd have to fight to make new friends. I mean, it was a struggle to break yourself into a new social environment. That was always a struggle. Every time I moved schools, it was a struggle to try and adapt. And every time you move cultures, you had to adapt to a new culture, and it was a kind of fight. And when I moved to boarding school, that was very formative, because suddenly I didn't have my parental lifeline. I had to kind of didn't do things myself and be independent and fight there. So I think that scrappiness, and the ability to bootstrap and just get things done and just keep going, whether I like it or not, was very important. The second part of it was, I'm an optimist. People call me the world's greatest optimist. And I think it's a great quality. I think to be an optimist is difficult. People think to be an optimist is easy. I actually think to be an optimist is a lot more difficult than people give it credit for. And I'll tell you why. Because you are much more likely to be wrong as an optimist than you are likely to be right. That's life. But it takes a little bit of, I think sometimes I just want to be right. And even if I take a hit back because I'm wrong, I'm okay with that. But I'd rather have that state of mind than be a pessimist, And I also balance a lot of people out as a result of that. So I think that's been very important. And I think the third or fourth, is empathy. I think you learn through all of these interactions, and you learn through all of your life experiences how to be empathic. And empathy is very important. Bring the human into every interaction, and to bring the human into every decision, and to bring the human into the way you think and what you want to achieve, I think is incredibly important. And I learned that through the travel, and through my parents, and through my wife, and through life experiences, and through the way you deal with people. And it sort of shaped my kind of value set for life. So those are some of I guess those are some of the sort of things that I would attribute to being important to me, and I guess important to what I've done.
If I could psychologically, if I can take a step before that and look at, if you have a somebody who's just starting to lead a social enterprise or a charity or a community interest company or commercial company that's listening to this, and they have a team that don't have that scrappiness or don't have that fight or don't have that sense of positivity and motivation, or don't have necessarily that sense of empathy, and they want to create it. Is it something when you wake up in the morning or it's 12 o'clock and you're having a difficult morning or whatever happens, or there's a real difficult client challenge or whatever it is, Uday, where there's a fire you've got to put out? Is it something that you tell yourself in your head when things get tough, that you say, Uday, you're going to do this? Or is it that you've learned from other people? What's your advice for us? How do we create more of that? You have it because you've worked really hard from 11 years old to have it. But if we haven't had that privilege of having to fight for it, how do you create this stuff?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question. I mean, that's almost at the heart of how certainly in the various organizations I built with partners. I mean, how do you create the right company culture that embodies some of that?
Yeah,
some of
exactly.
The thinking, and I think some of it you can motivate people into, and some of it's just picking the right people to be on that journey with you.
Yes.
We self-select as human beings. We self-select the right people who are, whether we self-select our life partner or whether we self-select our business partners, our friends, we self-select them according to the qualities we see within them. I think I subconsciously and more increasingly as I get older, consciously select for some of those qualities, and the scrappiness, the hunger, the ability to go after something for the right reasons, for the right motivations. In order to create that within an organization or within your family, I have children, and it's one of the things I'm trying to instill with my own children. Yeah, and that's no different from what you're trying to do in a workplace. Yeah, I don't mean that in a trite fashion, but it's you have certain you have certain aspirations for your children, and one of the things I teach my children as much as I can is gratitude. I'm like, wake up in the morning and feel the gratitude of what you have. You have so much. You have so much which so many people don't have, and you have so much anyway. You have your family, you have the love of your family, you have food on your plate, you have beautiful weather, it can be something new every day. And I think once you start to get that gratitude mindset, I think that's very much the same in a corporate scenario. The concept of gratitude and how you get people to embrace gratitude, but in a different way. And in that way is more about embrace gratitude because you have been delivered an opportunity to build something. You've been delivered an opportunity to build a company, or you've been a product, to build something that can actually be impactful to yourself because it'll make you a better person. It'll pay your bills. I mean, at whatever level you want to take it to. It could be impactful to your community. So, I mean, obviously, both, I guess, more APIS and certainly Anthemis and APIS. In both cases, one of the things I always set out to do was to create impact, but not just create impact by throwing capital at a problem, but also throwing knowledge. And knowledge is much more difficult to find than capital. I think if I had to think what is more valuable, I think knowledge is much more valuable because knowledge creates a level of sustainability when you transfer it to the right person, which you cannot even achieve with capital. That's just because the knowledge then allows people to build businesses that are sustainable, and sustainability is really what the long term. So I think when people understand that there's this great opportunity ahead of them, there's an opportunity to build something sustainable, there's an opportunity to build something that has impact for themselves, there's an opportunity to build impact for societies at large, then I think that then hopefully entices and brings out that behavior that you talk about, which is the scrappiness to get things done. We call it the startup mentality. I just call it the mentality. It's not just. I mean, we call it the startup mentality because often once we become larger corporations, and then we somehow lose sight of some of these things. But in my opinion, you should never lose sight of these.
No, absolutely.
the ability to learn, or the hunger for knowledge. All of these things should always be there. And the minute you lose sight of these things, you know something's going wrong, or you know you've lost your way. You need to find your way back. So it's a little bit like, as I said, it's a little bit like what I'm trying to teach my children. It's it's very similar, but it just the way you present it and the way you craft it is different. And a lot of it is about how you behave yourself. It's a lot about leading by example, leading by your own behavior and how you think about things. And it's an interesting thing. When we invest, we invest with private equity fund, we invest in companies. A lot of it is in financial inclusion. And one of the things one likes to do is one likes to sit down with the founder of the company or with the leadership of the company and spend time with them. And you'll kind of observe, you'll observe their behavior. So if you're at a social dinner and they're treating the waiter like horribly, I mean, how do you think they're going to be treating their employees?
Absolutely.
These things. So this is a very holistic, you have to think of it in a very holistic way.
Okay. And Uday, when you look at taking that and when you think, because I know you do both, you look at the micro situation or the granular situation of who's in front of you at dinner and should you invest in this company, and how we can be more grateful and resilient and create a sustainable mindset, all of these different elements of the people and the team that's in front of you. But when you zoom out and you look at the impact that you want to make in your life, in the world, what's most important to you when you think about macro? Is it about creating more of us? I mean, let me ask you this question. When you get to the end of your career and you look back and you're on your rocking chair, what would you like to see? Is it something you say, well, I just want my kids to be great people, and is that enough? Or is it that we have to change this? What's your focus when you look at your whole life and the whole world?
It's a huge question. That's a huge question. You want to achieve so many things for yourself and the people around you through your life. So, and you can split that up. You can split that up into personal, family, and I think I'd be delighted towards the end of my life career, whatever you want to call it, if I've raised smart, well-behaved, intelligent, well-meaning children who are impactful in their own right and who created positive change for the world. I think that would be a great outcome. I think if I can live my own life within a set of values and morality that is positive, creates positive change around me, makes other people better people around me, I think that's a great outcome for me. From a work perspective, when Matteo and I set out to build Apis, we wanted to, this was before impact and ESG was a buzzword or was fashionable. I said to myself, and he said, I said, what is it how can we make the greatest impact? Can we make we could become philanthropists and, we earn some money and then give away X percentage of our money to good causes. But there's that's sort of a commodity in some ways, right? There's a lot of that around. Where is the scarcity? And as I mentioned to you before, the scarcity is in the knowledge. We have this incredible knowledge. I'm not saying we're super knowledgeable people, but being in financial services for 20 odd years gives you an enormous amount of knowledge that you can then reuse in contexts which require it. So, and inclusion was one of those areas which really could benefit from a lot of interesting knowledge that we had learned through our career, spanning all these other big institutions and working in developed and developing markets and learning business models and being exposed to these business models. And so our ability to shape and help entrepreneurs to build their own sustainable businesses in this market, that knowledge, I think, was more valuable than...
Of course, and just you, absolutely. I see that.
And so we said, okay, let's use our knowledge and let's go out and build an organization where we are able to do create returns, but returns with responsibility. And that means that actually give our investors good returns and give them a market-beating return, because that's always important, but do it in a way that we can also create massive impact in societies and markets by
society, absolutely.
Inclusion, etc. Just try and get that out there. And so at the end of my career, if I think I'd be very proud if I'd built an organization that was sustainable and would continue to deliver that impact in a meaningful way in some of these markets.
Right now, we're sitting here talking in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, and hopefully it's starting to ease off, but there's definitely lots and lots of people out there still suffering, and countries suffering. But when you look at all sorts of different challenges that you see in the world, Uday, be it now in 2020 or throughout your life, what do you think is the biggest challenge that we have as human beings, and how do you feel best that we should manage ourselves better or change things? Because lots of people listening to this are interested in international development, are interested in philanthropy and the charity world and social enterprises and impact investment. So give us an idea of what you feel, how you feel we should operate differently to make this more of a sustainable world for everybody.
So look, the single biggest issue or challenge, as you put it, Craig, globally today is something that I think has been highlighted in a major way by the corona crisis, but was there. It was a pre-existing condition, not to use a buzz phrase that's being used right now. Yeah. The pre-existing condition of the world that was becoming more and more apparent, and that's the inequality of wealth.
Yes.
I believe that we were already moving to a crisis of epic proportions with the fact that the world's 1% owns 99%.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm not saying that's the number, but broadly that's accurate, right?
26 people apparently own half the world now.
Yeah. I mean, and if you start to think about this, it's absolutely crazy. And this wealth inequality manifests itself in so many terrible ways for the world. Let's not talk about social mobility, because I think the concept of social mobility and economic mobility is so heavily constrained by this wealth concentration that, the idea that people can escape where they were starts to become deeply diminished in so many ways as a result. That already exists. I think I have an even wider concern now. And my wider concern is that through technology and through what has become the fourth general purpose technology. So one of the things, you've met Carlota Perez, who's a fantastic author and who's written some wonderful books. But one of the things that she talks about is these technological revolutions. But let's take a step back even from those technological revolutions. We've had broadly four general purpose technologies that have changed the world. The first general purpose technology was the steam engine and the invention of the steam engine. That resulted in the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution had many, many consequences. Was one of the big consequences of the Industrial Revolution was the ability for people to get education, the rise of the middle class, so many things, so many positive things that happened to what were before feudal societies where people were stuck. The second one was actually electricity. So electricity was a big game changer in the turn of the century. And in fact, if you look at Stalin, not a great example for other reasons, but one of the things Stalin wrote very, very early as he took up power in what was the former Soviet Union was that he wanted 100% electrification of the Soviet Union, because he knew that would be a game changer in terms of progress. And indeed it has been. So the third one was the rise of information technology, which happened in the 60s, IBM, etc. Yeah. And as a subset, the internet and everything that has happened, that has been a game changer, because we went from the democratization of wealth, which was the Industrial Revolution and in some ways electrification, to the democratization of information, which really was started by Gutenberg when Gutenberg invented the printing press, and therefore took away the fact that the clerics had access to the Bible and had to, they could read the Bible directly, and, you cut out an entire layer. Democratization of information allows you to cut out an entire layer of people who disintermediate information. And so that's what that did. And the fourth one is the one that's coming now, which is artificial intelligence, which is a general purpose technology. Now, artificial intelligence is going to have profound and fundamental consequences for the world, because we'll be able to automate, we'll be able to create massive efficiencies. But the quid pro quo of that is that that is going to result in enormous amount of social change as a result of job losses and et cetera, et cetera. And that is going to exacerbate this situation of wealth inequality.
Yeah.
Exasperate this situation of wealth inequality, because today your ability to generate wealth is through access to capital, not through access to knowledge like we were talking about earlier. And it's those people who have a lot of capital and who can lever up that capital with cheap money, which is what you see today, that essentially allows you to make even more money, and so that allows the wealth to become wealthier. And the divide gets bigger and bigger. And, we started to see this in a major way. Actually, it's very interesting when you look at productivity growth in the United States through post-war years, right? So think about post the Second World War. You had massive productivity gains in the United States. And as those productivity gains increased, people's wage levels increased in lockstep. So as productivity increased, you created more wealth, and that wealth was passed on to people through wage increases. And that created the middle class in the United States in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and they kept growing. But at about the mid-70s, we started to see a little bit of a divergence, initially created by the petrol crisis in the 70s, where you had these wild gyrations in interest rates. And then as you got into the 90s, you started to see a massive fundamental shift. And that massive fundamental shift started to happen because you had shareholders of businesses who started to become the dominant stakeholders of businesses rather than the employees. And so what you started to see was productivity gains continuing to increase, but the return on that productivity started to go to shareholders and not to the employees anymore. And in fact, real incomes have declined since then. And I feel like with AI, we'll continue to see massive productivity gains. But again, it's going to be the holders of the capital who are going to take the lion's share of that capital or lion's share of that gain. And so this wealth inequality will continue to fundamentally increase.
When you give us that knowledge and that perspective, that understanding, what do you feel is important that we look at then in our smaller businesses, if we're not Mark Zuckerberg or whoever we are who controls a lot of the power with regards to AI coming on force and, this kind of world that we're stepping into. If we're running a mid-range organization, be it a charity or a commercial organization, what do you think are the 2 or 3 things that we need to think more about going into the next 5-10 years? What would your advice be for a leader stepping into this melting pot?
I think it's what I talked about earlier. It falls back to a word called empathy. You need to think about everything with all the multiple stakeholders that are associated with that.
Yes.
Thing. So it's not just about delivering value to investors or shareholders. It's about what positive change you can make to the environment around you. It's about how you treat your employees or how you treat your colleagues or how you treat people within the organization and the humanity around that. It's about thinking about what structural change your actions can cause within a market, within a company, etc. It's all about that. So you need to think at multiple stakeholder levels. We have really been capitalism as it is today, and what we call the market and market forces have driven us very much to this edge of delivering only shareholder value and returns. And so I think we need to think very, very broadly, much beyond that, into all these different aspects of stakeholders.
Just for a second, if I can ask you this, say, for example, you have a team whereby you've got a team of 12 fundraisers or 20 people who are looking to raise money right now. and they don't come from a place where they're serving a set of traditional stakeholders. They're trying to raise £1.5 million to build a hospital in Kenya. Talk to me about the psychology of money, Uday, because you've been in the financial markets pretty much all of your adult life, and you understand this is not about money. It's about a whole lot of different values and beliefs and the way in which you treat people. But if you were to give us some fundraising advice about the psychology of money, so just give me a couple of minutes of what is money and how do I grow my confidence to ask somebody for it? I mean, just talk to me about the basics of understanding what money is and how do I get more of it?
Yeah, look, I think that this good news, and there's some good news in everything that I said. The good news has been that I said when we set up APIS in 2014, ESG and impact were really a niche sort of thought process, and the way people thought about it was, it was sort of a one part of it. Today, it's become very mainstream. So if you go back to 2014, when we started APIS, I think at that time the concept of ESG and impact was really a very niche concept. It wasn't something that was being embraced by the wider world. I think what we find now is that the concept of returns with responsibility, the fact that money needs to be used responsibly, like ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance, has become very mainstream. This is something that's become a real topic that people discuss around the world. And I think that's good. That means that there is now suddenly an appreciation that it isn't just about making a financial return, it's about making a return on multiple axes in multiple, in multiple ways. And so people now think about what are the social returns of what I'm creating? What are the environmental returns of what I'm creating? How am I improving governance? So this is becoming real. So to your question, I think that you obviously have to, in a way that, like I talked earlier about self-selecting the right friends and self-selecting the right people to work with, I think it's becoming increasingly easy to self-select those people in the investment community and sources of capital who are very much in the view that everything has to have a return at multiple levels, and they like to understand what those returns are, and they like to explain what those returns are. So whether you're raising money for a hospital in Kenya or you're raising money for a school somewhere else, it doesn't necessarily need to deliver a large financial return. I think it should always deliver a small financial return because of sustainability. That's an opinion point.
Yes,
but it can return a very large social return, or it can return
absolutely.
a environmental return. And as long as you can measure that and explain it to people, I think that's what they're looking for, right? And then it's all about measurement. This is part of the issue. The issue has always been, give me some money and we'll build a school and we'll return. If you say, give me some money, we're going to build a school. And by the way, these are the KPIs we're looking at. How many students we have, what level they get. Yes. We're going to deliver you those KPIs every quarter, and so that you can see the progress, and we're going to benchmark ourselves and our performance against those KPIs.
Right.
And those KPIs don't need to be return on invested capital. They can be the number of people that you've managed to get into that institution. There can be how many people you've got to a certain level at school. There can be any of these things.
Yes, but prove your worth. And with regards to money itself, Uday, is how do people get from a position of people get to a position of confidence where they can sit there and say, I know we're good, but I've always asked people for, £100. I need to ask people for £100,000. What's the shift psychologically that people need to make to understand their value? Because a lot of people, of course, are fearful because they don't feel that they're worth it. They don't feel that they can ask for £10 million, but they know that they can make that work. But there's something in them that's stopping them. So is it about understanding that you're worth it inside yourself? Is it about experience and getting more experience first? How does people go from a place of being worried about asking people for more money to being hugely confident in the delivery of what they're doing from a KPI perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about conviction, I mean, it's if you have the conviction that you can deliver and the confidence that you can deliver what you're saying you're delivering, then you can ask for whatever you want.
Okay.
I think so. It's the same way. I mean, I have the conviction, and that I will deliver my investors a certain return.
Absolutely.
Right? I go to them and I will say, look, I will deliver you this return. I have the confidence to deliver you this return. And I will also deliver you returns on the different axes that I talked about, the ESG and impact.
Yes.
I'll deliver you all these returns. I know I can do it. And I have the confidence in myself to be able to do it. And that I just turn around and say, look, I'd rather you give me 10 million or 100 million or whatever it is to invest, because I know I can deliver it. And I actually walk into a meeting and I know that, and I said, and I'm very happy for people to ask me any question that will allow them to get themselves comfortable, that I have the ability to make that delivery to them, right? And so I think,
has that come from experience and your confidence about who you are as a child from 11 years old? Or
yeah, it does. It does come from it does come from many things.
Yes,
and you learn about this very quickly when you have children. I have, and by the way, I have girls, so it's even more important. Is how do you build self-confidence in children?
Yes.
You have to basically always be positive with them and always be encouraging with them.
Yes.
And but also help them to recognize their failures and help them to learn from their failures and help them to get up and just move on and take the next step. And that's what happened with me when I grew up, and sure with you. You go through these phases and you learn and you learn that you learn what you can deliver, how you can deliver it, how realistic it is, and how to communicate that with people. And that's what you're trying to do. So yeah,
that's really powerful, because it comes back to experience, your values, your upbringing, and being able to, in your own mind, sit down and say, this is what I'm going to deliver, to be sure that you can do it, to know you can do it. Can I ask, I've got one final question, because I know that I've asked you a lot and I've got lots of questions in my head, but I know our time, I'm aware of our time and your time, is one final question, which is an impossible question to answer, but you've done very well so far, which is, with everything that you've learned, and you've given us so much value today, what is the one most important piece of advice that you'd give to the world? I mean, right now, as you sit here with your girls and you're thinking about the future, I know that it's not one thing, but try to give me the most important things. What's your final piece of advice for us all out there right now as we sit here in the middle of this pandemic?
It's a very difficult question. I think there's so many things, but I think the most important, I think maybe if we had to distill it, down to one thing, would be I don't know if it's one thing or two things, a combination. It's essentially be aware of what is really going on around you. Be aware of these issues that we talked about around inequality and around service. Just be aware. Yeah. So either you choose to be aware, choose not to be aware because it suits you to do that, because it makes it easier to just live life like that. Or you're just not aware. But awareness is the first, is the first step to solve the problem. Be aware. And then once you're aware, be sensitive. Be sensitive to how your own conduct, your own actions, your own thoughts, the way you conduct yourself, the way you talk to people, the way you build your business, the way you make decisions. Be aware how that impacts what is going on around you. Be aware how that can create either positive change or negative change, and try and conduct yourself in a way that builds positive change rather than negative change. And I think that awareness, and some people, there's a lot of buzzwords in the world. Some people, it's call it mindfulness. It's mindfulness. It's aware, mindful, understand, be in the moment, understand what's going on, and then think about the consequences of what you do.
Yeah.
And I think that's, if that was one thing, but there are many things. But if there was
but that, I mean, we need, I think, Uday, the power of that for me is that we have so much stuff, especially now. I've never seen anything like it in my life, how much media is coming at me now. We need 3 or 4 big messages from you because we can't take on 100 things all the time. And so I know there's lots of things, but those 3 or 4 elements that you've given us today about having that grit and that drive and that empathy and to be aware and understand how we treat people and to have the confidence of experience and look at our KPIs and say, this is what I'm going to deliver and know that I can deliver it. Those 5, 6 things are really valuable. So thank you so much for your time. And thank you very much for your wisdom and for sharing with us.
No, thank you. This was a great discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
Cheers.